Today's daf we're going to be learning is Gittin Daf Mem Tet. We started the 5th chapter yesterday's class, and we talked about the nizakin. Someone who causes damage has to pay with the best of their land. So now we said that that's mishum tikkun olam, to which the Gemara had said, what do you mean? Isn't that a Torah law? It says, meitav sadeu, meitav karmo yishalem. If you damage someone else's field, you have to pay with the best of your land. So isn't that clear from the Torah? To which we had our first answer yesterday. Today we'll get to a second answer to that question, a different possibility. But right now the possibility is that our Mishnah follows Rabbi Yishmael. Rabbi Yishmael said that by Torah law, you only have to pay by the damage, by the best of the person whose property you damaged, not your own property. It's assessed by the best property, the level of the best property of the person who you caused damage to. The tikkun olam is that you have to pay the best of your land, okay, and not necessarily the person who damaged, right? And not the person you damaged, but your own. And then we said that was a machloket, Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva. Although when we saw Rabbi Akiva, okay, we saw this braita that said basically, Rabbi Yishmael says it's based on the one who you damaged, which again is the Torah law. That's how we darshans meitav sadeu, meitav karmo yishalem. We saw this braita at the end of Memchet Amud Bet. Rabbi Akiva said this language, which wasn't so clear, which we're going to get to and understand today, which is lo ba'akatuv ela ligbot lenizakim min ha'idi. The pasuk was really only saying that you have to pay from the best of the land. And then what we don't really know what he means, because how is he differing from Rabbi Yishmael, who also said it's the best? He must mean he says the best of your land, not the best of the person who you damaged. And he adds this line, kal v'chomer lahekdesh, and all the more so for hekdesh. So that was the braita that chose the machlok of Rabbi Yishmael, Rabbi Akiva. We said that our Mishnah must hold like Rabbi Yishmael, that by Torah law, it's by the person who you damaged, their best land, and by rabbinic law, tikkun olam is the best of your land. Then we had some question with Rabbi Yishmael, what case is he talking about? And then we gave an answer, we rejected it, and then the Gemara basically said, here's a second answer. So that's what we're going to start today, from the very, very last words of Memchet Amud Bet. Ela amar Rav Acha bar Yaakov. What really the debate between Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva is about is hacha b'mayaskina tigon shaita idit denizak keziburit mazik. The real issue becomes in a particular case where, let's say I damage your property, and then I have to pay you. Remember, you could pay either in money or you could pay in land. Right? Again, Rashi says the ideal is to pay in money, and only if you don't have money do you take it from the land. But Tosfot says it could be either. Rabbeinu Tam says it could be either land or money. Those are equal. Movable property, less good. That's only if you have no choice. But it would be money or land. Either is fine. But in any case, let's say you take from my land. You want to collect from my land. So when Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva argue, again, by Torah law, it's talking about a case where your best land is equal in value to my worst land. And comes Rabbi Yishmael and he says, look, meitav sadeu, meitav karmo yishalem, we're talking about the value of your property, not mine. So I only have to pay by your best property because I damaged your property. So it's your property I damaged. I pay by the best of your property, not mine. So that's where Rabbi Yishmael savar b'dinizak shanin. Rabbi Akiva savar, but Rabbi Akiva disagrees. No, if my best land is way better than my worst land is equal to your best land, why should I pay on my worst land? I caused you damage. According to Rabbi Akiva, I have to pay by Rabbi Akiva savar b'dimazik shaninan. I have to pay by mine. And again, that's where the tikkun olam comes in. According to Rabbi Yishmael, I only have to pay by your best land, not mine. My land could be way better, but I don't have to pay. But tikkun olam said, this is not appropriate. You should pay, right? I should have to pay by my best land because my best land is way better. And why should I end up getting away with paying with my cheapest land? Again, I'm just going to remind you, we're talking about where let's say, caused $100 worth of damage. I give you a piece of land, either a small piece of land, which is the best land that's worth $100, or I give you a bigger piece of land that's worth $100 of poor quality land. But either which way, it's still valued at $100. It's just a matter of, do we take it from my best land or do we take it from your best? Does it have to match your best land, which could be way worse than my best land? That's the machlok. So now, my time at Rabbi Yishmael. So what's the reason for Rabbi Yishmael? Let's try to understand it. Again, assuming that this is the machloket, it's in a case where your best land is equal to my worst land, and the debate is, do I have to pay by your best or my best, which is obviously going to be a lot more. Again, same value, still $100 worth, but better land. So now let's see where they get their opinions from. My Talmud Rabbi Ishmael, what's his reason? Ne'emra sadeh lemata v'ne'emra sadeh lemala. The pasuk where we have metav sadeh u'metav karmo yishalem starts to talk about ki av'il ish sadeh. If you make a fire in your field, okerem v'shilachet be'ero bi'er b'stei acher, and then the fire jumps to someone else's field. Metav sadeh u'metav karmo yishalem. Now, when it talks about sadeh acher, who's the field? Someone else's field. So because there it's someone else's field, and then it says you pay the best of the field, it must mean the same field. We're talking about their field, therefore the quality is based on their field. So mas sadeh hamura lamala dinizak, just like there, it's the one who you damaged. Af sadeh hamura lamata dinizak. Also the one here is the one you damaged. Rabbi Akiva, what's his logic? Because he says it goes by my land. I'm the one who damaged. I have to pay my best land. Rabbi Akiva savar metav sadeh yishalem. Says you have to pay from the best of your land. Now, who's the you and who's the best of your land? Assigned to me. I have to pay from the best of my land. The subject of that part of the sentence is my land. Me paying, and therefore the field says your land, right? You have to pay from your land. You are the same you. It's talking about the one who has to pay. So it's assessed by mine. Rabbi Ishmael, so now how does Rabbi Ishmael, that is really the simple reading of the pasuk, because metav sadeu, metav karmo, really it is talking about me, the one who damaged. So he says the following, ahanik zera shava, ahanik kra. There's two different cases, and sometimes the gzera shava works to say based on the other person, and sometimes it works based on saying me, the one who damaged, ahanik kra. So sometimes the gzera shava, which says it goes based on the nizak, the one who was damaged, that works. In some cases, it actually goes by my own field. How would that work? Well, Rabbi Ahani Gzera Shava L'chidamara. So we already said the Gzera Shava saying b'diniza is when the damaged person's property is their high level equals my lowest level. So even though it's my lowest level land, it's your highest level land, and therefore, since it's your highest level land and I damaged your property, I only have to pay your highest level land. That we already explained. Ahani kra, but when do I have to actually pay by my own? Well, let's say I have good quality land and poor quality land. I don't have anything in the middle. Before we said my worst is equal to your best. Let's say my worst is less than your best, but my best is better than your best. So basically, your best land is in between my best and my worst, and I don't have something in the middle. Then I have to Then I have to pay according to my best, because I can't go lower than yours. And since I don't have anything equal, I have to go higher. And in that case, I'll have to pay based on your best land, which means I have to pay based on my best land, because I have to pay my best land, which is better than your best land. So again, in the case where my worst equals your best, I only have to pay, again, this is by Torah law, rabbinic law changes all this, but by Torah law, I only have to pay your best. But if your best is in between, right, I don't have anything of that level, then I have to go up to my best land and pay you from my best. Now we have to go back to Rabbi Akiva and the Mishnah. So this was all just to explain, right, to deal with our question we had yesterday, and try to figure out what case does Rabbi Ishmael disagree with Rabbi Akiva, and we assessed that they disagree in a case where my worst equals your best. Again, I'm the one who damaged, you're the one who was damaged, and since my worst is equal to your best, and you're getting your best, that's fine, according to Rabbi Ishmael. Rabbi Akiva says, no way, no how. I have to pay my best, because I damaged you. Now we go back to Rabbi Akiva. Did Rabbi Akiva really say this? Because let's look inside. If you remember, what did Rabbi Akiva say? The pasuk just came to say that they get paid from the best. Now, it doesn't say the best of my land. It doesn't really specify. We assume that's what he meant. And then he says this, kavachomer lahekdesh, and all the more so if it's a case of hekdesh. So the first thing we're going to have to understand is, what is this kavachomer lahekdesh? And then we're going to try to figure out what is Rabbi Akiva saying in general. So first they quote Rabbi Akiva, Omer, lo ba katuv, the pasuk is really just coming, ela ligvot linizakim min ha'idit, just to tell you that damages are paid from the best. V'kal v'chomer, and all the more so in a case of hekdesh, when something is sanctified and it belongs to the temple. So my kavachomer lahekdesh. The first thing is to figure out what does he mean by this kavachomer lahekdesh. If it's that my ox damaged an ox that belonged to the temple, it wasn't your animal, it was an animal that belonged to the temple. Well, guess what? You're not liable for damages. You might find this surprising, and in fact, we'll see a dissenting opinion. But the pasuk says, if my ox gores my friend's ox, then I have to pay damages. But if it's not my friend's ox, because the hekdesh, the temple, is not my friend, I actually don't have to pay. Crazy to think that, but yes, I don't have to pay according to this. So it can't be saying that when I pay damages to the temple, I have to pay with my best, which would actually have been the simple reading. If I have to pay my friend from the best when I damage, all the more so, I have to pay hekdesh from the best. Right now, the Gemara is going to reject that reading, although we will come back to it because it really is the best simple reading. Let's say I say I'm giving $100 worth, okay? In this case, it's 100 dinarim, 100 zuzim. It's the same thing, dinarim and zuzim. I'm giving 100 to the bed of kabbai. And then I don't pay up. And Ate Gizbar, the treasurer of the temple, comes and seizes my property for the value of this. Bishakel me'idi. So what it means to say is if I don't pay up what I committed to the temple, well, they take it from the best of my property. That's what it might mean, v'kavachomer lahekdesh. But what's the problem? Lo yehei ela ba'al chov. I'm really just a ba'al chov. I didn't damage anyone in this case. All I am is someone who owes money to someone else. It happens to be I owe it to the temple, but ba'al chov dino bebenoni. We already learned that if you owe someone money, you pay from the average land. You don't have to pay from the best of your land. And if you want to say maybe Rabbi Akiva disagrees with our Mishnah, and maybe Rabbi Akiva thinks that someone who owes money has to pay from the best, but you can reject that argument, because even if he thinks that a regular Baal Chov pays from the best, to the hekdesh you wouldn't need to. Why not? Because you could say, you could knock out that kavachomer argument. It's not a good kavachomer argument. Kavachomer means hekdesh is more serious, right? Kavachomer, all the more so in a more serious case. Now, hekdesh is actually less serious, as we just proved, because why? A Baal Chov has to pay damages. A Baal Chov is a regular person, and just like he has to pay obligations he owes, he also has to pay if he damages someone. That's what we just said. He damages his friend, he has to pay. But Tomar behekdesh sheken hu rak kol b'nizakin. But, and also, by the way, he can also collect money from someone who damages him. Hekdesh can't collect money from someone who damages them. So therefore, that would put them, they wouldn't be a kavachomer if the Baal Chov gets idit, all the more so the hekdesh. The hekdesh is actually less, because hekdesh can demand money less easily. Because if you get damaged and you're hekdesh, right, you have something of hekdesh that gets damaged, you can't demand money for it. We just showed that. So can't say that. So therefore, we're going to go back to option one. And how are we going to resolve this? Because we just said you don't have to pay damages. Well, la'olam dinal klei Torah didan l'Torah dehekdesh. We really are talking about a case of damages and not just that I owe money to hekdesh because I committed something. But my ox gored an animal that was designated already for the temple. Rabbi Akiva Sarvalaka Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh. I told you at the time there was a different opinion about this. Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh holds that you do have to pay for hekdesh. Okay, we'll have to figure out how he reads the pasuk about the re'ehu, your friend. So let's read the different opinions. Did time. Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh Omer. So Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh says against what we said previously. Shor shel hekdesh shenagach l'shor shel hediot. For regular, this is the opposite case. If you have an animal that belongs to the temple and he gored a regular animal, a person's animal, patur, he's exempt. The temple is exempt because the temple doesn't assume responsibilities for damages. But shel hediot. Shenagach l'shor shel hekdesh. But if it's my ox who gored an ox that belonged to the temple, bein tam ubein muad mishalem nezek shalem. Whether it's a tam or whether it's a muad, it doesn't matter if it's an animal who gored already 3 times or didn't gore 3 times. Normally, if you haven't gored anyone 3 times, you only pay half damages. In this case, if my ox, who never damaged anyone before, or maybe one other time or something, but is not a shor muad and normally would pay half damages if he caused damage, but it gores an animal of hekdesh, I have to pay nezek shalem. I have to pay full damages according to Rabbi Shimon ben Menasia. This is a complete opposite of the other opinion. Not only am I responsible to pay, but I have to pay more than the average person. Not if it was a muad. If it was a muad, I'd pay the same as everyone else. But I don't have that exemption of a short time. Now we get to how they learn shorei ehu. Your friend's ox is where chatzi nezek comes in. You only have to pay half damages if the animal wasn't used to goring and you didn't expect it. Then you pay half damages, but that's only if it's your friends. But if it's the temples, you have to pay full damages. So the verses only said shorei ehu because the verses were differentiating between shor tam and shor muad. But in the hekdesh, you have to pay full damages. So now we have it that Rabbi Akiva, what he's saying is, when you pay the edith, the best of your land, you pay for damages, right? When you damage someone else, you have to pay for the best of your land, and that's my land. And all the more so if you damage hekdesh, because if you damage hekdesh and it's a short time, you'd only pay half damages, but hekdesh, you pay full damages, so all the more so you'd have to pay with the best of your land, because hekdesh is more strict. So that we've resolved it. So we basically say that Rabbi Akiva must hold like Rabbi Shimon ben Menasia. Well, now the Gemara comes up with a creative thing. How did we get here? Because remember, we wanted to say the Homachloket, Rabbi Shema, Rabbi Akiva, is used to explain Rabbi Yishmael and used to explain our Mishnah. What do you mean Mishum Tikkun Olam? Because according to Rabbi Yishmael, it's only Bidin Nizak, and right, he disagrees with Rabbi Akiva, who says it's Bidin Mazik, but we assess it based on the person who damaged. And Rabbi Yishmael says we based it on the person who you caused damage to. And even if your land is better, you have better land, you don't have to pay from that. Tikkun Olam came to say, but the rabbi said you have to pay with the best of your land. And that's how we explained it. And that he disagrees with Rabbi Akiva, because Rabbi Akiva said, even by Torah law, it's b'dimazik. Okay? I assess it it has to be assessed by me as the one who damaged by my property. Now that we've established that Rabbi Akiva holds like Rabbi Shimon ben Menasia about the hekdesh, the Gemara suggests a bit of a strange suggestion, but we'll explain in a minute why they get there. Ihachi, if already you're going to say that Rabbi Akiva holds like Rabbi Shimon ben Menasia, that if I damage hekdesh, I actually have to pay, and the rabbis don't think so. Well, why are we assuming that this whole machloket between them is when what we explained in the beginning of this daf, Rabbi Acha bar Yaakov, that Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva disagree when the person who I damaged, right, is his best land or your best land, her best land, is equal to my worst land? Why don't you just say Dilma Kule Ama B'Dinizak Shamina? Right? And the whole machloket, by the way, is right. Do we assess it by my value, my best land, or your best land? But why don't you just say everyone agrees B'Dinizak? Everyone agrees with Rabbi Yishmael. Now remember, Rabbi Yishmael was the one who was very clear. He says Meitav Karmo Shel Nizak and Meitav Sadeu Shel Nizak. He said it all goes based on the other person's land. Now, why don't we just simply say, and remember, Rabbi Akiva never said the word B'Dimazik. Right? He never said it's assessed by the value of the one who damaged. He just said these words, which were very unclear. Lo ba'hakachuv ela ligvot lenizakim inaydi. The pasuk just came to say that damage is paid from the best of the land. He didn't say the best of whose. And kavachomer lahekdesh, and all the more so for hekdesh. So why don't we just say very simply, all Rabbi Akiva is coming to say is to talk about hekdesh. He doesn't disagree with Rabbi Yishmael. Really, you pay by the best of the person you damaged, because you caused damage to them. It's all about them and what you caused to them. So pay by the best of their land. And the whole machloket is all about the hekdesh. What if you damaged hekdesh, though? Do Rabbi Akiva savarlak Rabbi Shimon ben Menasia, that you would have to pay damages and from the best, just like you would pay damages to anyone else? Rabbi Yishmael savarlak Rabbanan. And when it comes to the hekdesh thing, only Rabbi Akiva mentioned that. Rabbi Yishmael didn't mention it, because Rabbi Yishmael doesn't think you have to pay damages for hekdesh. They hold like the rabbis. It's not part of Rei Ehu, your friend, so you don't have to pay. Now, the problem is kind of clear, but we're going to now list 3 issues with why this can't possibly be. So the first reason is, number 1, imken, my lo bahakatuv. Look at the wording. It's true that Rabbi Akiva didn't say it's valued by the one who damaged and the level of their land. But he does say, the first words already say, lo bahakatuv ella. You misunderstood the pasuk. The pasuk only came to teach you L'nizakim min ha'idi, that people who damage pay the best. Now, he must be disagreeing in that line. Before he even gets to the hekdesh, she's already taken a fight with Rabbi Yishmael and says, no, that's not the way we understand the pasuk. Now, if Rabbi Yishmael says the pasuk is coming to teach you, it goes by the person you damaged, then process of elimination, if Rabbi Akiva says, I don't understand the pasuk the way you do, he must be saying it goes by the one who damaged, by his by his or her property. So that's number one. It does seem like he disagrees about who we assess, right? From whose property do we decide whose edit are we using? That's number one. Number two, v'od my kavachomer lahekdesh. Well, there wouldn't be a kavachomer lahekdesh if he's saying Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh. It wouldn't say the words kavachomer lahekdesh. It's actually a leniency, right? What he's trying to say, if we view, again, we talked about this in the this is from the previous stuff. If we view going by the nizak as a leniency, that's the whole thing. The tikkun olam was astringent, right? We're going to be more strict. If it's lenient, more lenient, that we're going by the nizak, kal v'chomer lahekdesh, or the more so for hekdesh, we want to say hekdesh is more strict, so we're going to be more strict. Well, more strict is to go by me, the one who damaged, not by the one whose property I damaged. So that also doesn't make sense. And third question, v'od hama Rav Ashi, didn't Rav Ashi say, moving now to Amabet, Tanya behedya metav sadeu metav karmo yishalem. Metav sadeu shel nizak or metav karmo shel nizak divrei Rabbi Yishmael. Rabbi Akiva omer metav sadeu shel mazik or metav karmo shel mazik. This is the best proof, which is we have another braita. It's true it wasn't so clear in the first braita what Rabbi Akiva really holds. But from the second braita, it's 100% clear that they debate, do we assess it based on the value of the one who was damaged, or do we assess it based on the value of the one who damaged? And that is what I just read. That metav sadeu, metav karbo, you have to pay from the best of the one who was damaged, according to Rabbi Yishmael. And Rabbi Akiva says the best of the one who caused the damage. So clearly that's the debate. Okay, so quick review of what we've done so far today. We ended yesterday with this question on trying to understand Rabbi Yishmael's approach. We answered it yesterday, rejected the answer. We came up with a different answer today, that we're talking about a case where the case that Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva are disagreeing about is the case where the best of the land of the person who is damaged is equal to the worst of the land of the person who caused the damage. And then there becomes this debate, who do we go with? And that's why Rabbi Yishmael is a more lenient approach, because we go by their best, which is actually my worst. And Rabbi Akiva says, no, we go by my best. Then we showed where Rabbi Yishmael gets it from, where Rabbi Akiva gets it from, right? How they each interpret the pasuk, Zera Shava versus understanding the simple reading of the text. And we even showed a case where Rabbi Yishmael could fit with the simple reading of the text as well, where I don't have equal land that's equal to their best, and it's in between, and then I have to go up. And then, right, to my value of my best land. And then we tried to understand this kavachomer lahekdesh of Rabbi Akiva. Took a little while to figure out what exactly it means. Once we saw what it means, we said maybe that's the whole debate, whether you think that you have to pay for damages for hekdesh or not. In the end, we said, no, that can't clearly be the debate between them. And we're back to understanding the debate between them is bidim mazik or bidim nizak, right? From who do we assess the damages? Based on the damage you caused, or based on the damage or based on the person who you caused damage to and their best field, or do you have to pay from the best of your own fields? And that's the machloka between them. In addition, they argue about the hekdesh issue, which is, do you have to pay for hekdesh or not? Rabbi Akiva clearly thinks, we don't know what Rabbi Yishmael holds about the hekdesh, but Rabbi Akiva clearly thinks for sure hekdesh also has to be from your edit when you pay damages for hekdesh. Now we're going to have, and that was all within understanding that how do we understand the tikkun olam in the Mishnah? Now we're going to go back to our very original question from yesterday. How do we understand tikkun olam? On a Torah level, it's all Rabbi Yishmael, the Mishnah. On a Torah level, you only have to pay based on, right, especially if their land is worse than your land, you have to pay by their best land when you damage someone's property. But tikkun olam came and said, but if you have better land, you have to pay by the best of your land. Now Ravina is going to have a different interpretation. Ravina wants to fit the Mishnah with Rabbi Akiva. La'olam matnitim Rabbi Akiva. Okay, the Mishnah matches Rabbi Akiva. How so? Isn't it Torah law according to Rabbi Akiva b'demazik? So what's the tikkun olam? Well, Because again, we already established this. He holds on a Torah level. It goes by the value of your own land, who you're the one who's paying. Be Rabbi Shimon, what's this tikkun olam? Well, the Mishnah also matches Rabbi Shimon. What does Rabbi Shimon hold in general? Didarish tama dekha. Rabbi Yishmael explains the reasons for psukim, or for mitzvah, for all intents and purposes, for laws. Not everybody thinks that you can try to figure out the reasoning behind the laws of the Torah, but Rabbi Yishmael tries to do this. And what did he say? Matam kamar. How can he understand this Mishnah? The tikkun olam is coming to say, what's the reason for the Torah law? Tikkun olam is different from other places where we saw that it was a rabbinic ordinance or something. But what we mean here is matam nizakim shamin lahem bi'idit. Why is it that the nizakim have to pay the best of their own land? If I pay damage, I have to pay from the best of my own land. Mishum mipnei tikkun haolam, because of tikkun haolam, which is Tanya, as we're going to see in a Braita. Now we're going to explain what the tikkun olam is. Amar Rabbi Shimon, mipnei ma amru, and here Rabbi Shimon says it explicitly. It's not just according to the logic of his approach that we're going to darshan the reasons, but Rabbi Shimon actually in a Braita explains this reason in a logical manner. Mipnei ma amru, so from what reason did they say that nizakim have to pay from the best of their land? Mipnei hagazlanim umipnei hachamsanim, because of robbers and thieves and people who steal other people's stuff. Kadei sheyomar adam, so the people say, lama ani gozel v'lama ani chomes, it's not worth it to me to steal your stuff. Lemachar beitin yordim lenechasai v'notlim sadena eshali. If I have to pay from the best of my land, I'm going to think twice before I do this. I'm going to say, well, I'll steal your stuff, and then tomorrow the Beit Din is going to come to my house and take my best property. I don't want to lose my best property, so it's not worth it to me. That's the tikkun olam. It's to create a society where people don't steal. And they rely on what it says in the Torah. Meitav sadeh umeitav kamo yishalem. And that's how we explain the pasuk. You have to pay from the best of your land. Leficha chamru, and that's why they said, again, that's why the Torah law states, hanizakin shamin lahem beidit. Okay, and that's why people who damage have to pay from the best of their land is a deterrent. Now the Braita continues, and we're now going to give reasoning for all the other halachot in the Mishnah. Why does someone who has to pay back a loan or an obligation have to pay the average land? Let's say I look into your house and I say, wow, you've got a great field. I really want it, right? This goes back to the 10 Commandments, lo tachmod, don't desire what your friend had. But people do. And we're worried that I might look at your field and say, wow, I really want that really awesome field. So what will I do? Okay, a little creative thinking here, but I'm going to go lend you money. And then what will happen? You won't pay me back. And then I'll demand it from that great land, and I'll be able to take it. If I can take your best land, I can take your land. And that's why they said I only get average land, so I don't try to steal your best land. Again, steal, it's not exactly steal, but come up with a mechanism by which I can get your land. So then the Gemara says, well, if that's the case, if we're really worried that people are going to do that and loan money, again, it's a little bit of a strange concern, but loan money just so they can steal, basically, again, not steal, but get people's land. Well, then we should allot you only to be able to collect from the worst of the land, because even average land you might decide you want to get. So they say, no, because you have something pulling you on the other side. If I know I can only get a loan paid back from your worst land, I won't want to loan money to anybody because it's not worth it to me, right? I'm going to end up, we saw that all with Prusbal, right? I'm going to end up not getting my loan paid back with, right? It's going to get paid back with bad land. I don't want bad land. So we have those two things pulling at us, and that's how we get to the average. Now we're going to move on. The Braita, again, we're still in the Braita here. K'tubat isha b'ziburit divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Meir omer b'beinu. There's a machloket here about whether the ketubah of a woman, we saw in the Mishnah, it's ziburit, from the worst of the land, but that's only Rabbi Yehuda, and we'll see later it's the rabbi's opinion. Rabbi Meir holds it's the average land. So now Amar Rabbi Shimon. Now Rabbi Shimon again is going to come like he did earlier in the Braita and explain what's the logic. For what reason is the ketubah of a woman in the worst of the land? You ready for this one? This is a classic Gemara line. It comes up in many different places and often even in different wording. We don't need to give the woman more incentive to get married. She's already incentivized to marry. Women would much rather get married than men. They're much more motivated to get married. And this is mainly in those days. Okay, one could argue, is it still true today? I'm not going to go there. We don't really know. I mean, obviously there's different people and different, that's all really personal. Maybe it's still true as a general rule, but what they're really talking about is more the issue, or at least possibly the financial benefit for women of marriage. It's already much better for her to have a man supporting her, and therefore she wants to get married much more than the man wants to get married. She needs it more, and therefore, right now, again, one could claim, right, men get remarried often much quicker than women, right? They need the marriage more so than the women do at that point. Anyway, there's a lot of, where this goes today is really a big question. But in any case, I want to deal with the way the Gemara views it, which is really for financial considerations. The woman would really much rather get married. That's why the financial incentive to get married has to be for the man. And the financial incentive is that, yes, you have to commit to her ketubah, and that you'll give her money in the event of death or divorce, but she'll take it from the worst of your land, because we don't want it to be a deterrent for the husband, that he won't want to marry her because she's going to take his good land away, or, he'll have to lose that land eventually if he dies, or if she gets married, right? His kids will lose it. Anyway, basically, it's incentive, from financial incentive, we keep it at the lowest. Davar acher, another thing, isha yotza lirtzona v'shelo lirtzona. A woman can be divorced whether she wants it or not. This is something we discussed in the beginning of the Masechah, right? It comes up a lot that women don't have to be willing participants in the divorce. They just have to receive the get, but they don't have to receive it willingly. They can be against the divorce, but they can still get divorced. Again, Takanat Rabbeinu Gershom changed all this. But in the time of the Gemara, it was still the case, and by Torah law, for sure, it's the case. But a man can only divorce her of his own volition. If he doesn't want the divorce, it won't happen. So what does this have to do with anything? And what does this mean? The Gemara doesn't really understand either. So the Gemara says, "My davar acher." What do we mean by this davar acher? V'chit hema, if you want to say, hihechi techi mapik la'iu takina la Rabbanit k'tuba minei. Just like when he divorces her, he has to give her a financial gift. Well, you might say, when she causes the divorce. Now, so what do you mean? She can't give it to get, but she can't cause the divorce. What can she do? She can make her husband suffer. She can make his life miserable until he decides to divorce her. She does have a way to make him divorce her. So you might say, if she was the motivator for the divorce, then takinu la Rabbanan, right? I'm sorry, nami litaknu le Rabbanan k'tuba mina. Maybe the rabbis also instituted, in that case, she'll have to pay him a penalty. Well, in case you thought that, it's not the case. And why is it not the case? Tashma, now we're going to reinterpret what we just read before. Isha yotza lirtzona v'shelo lirtzona. In the end, she can go out willingly or not willingly. Basically, he does it and she has really no choice in the matter. But ha'isha no motzi ela lirtzona. She can't force a divorce entirely. While she could cause the husband to want to divorce her, in the end, if he doesn't want to divorce her, he doesn't have to. It's up to him. Efshal demashela begita. They could be separated, and he could just push off giving her the get. She can make him crazy. So he says, fine, let's live separately, and I just won't give you a get. Since that's all in his power, there's no financial incentive to give him, or not incentive, but there's no bonus he gets if she causes the divorce, because in the end, the bottom line is she can't really cause a divorce. She can cause him to want to give her a divorce, but in the end, it's all up to him, right? This is part of the problem with the team nowadays. And then it was also a problem, but that in the end, he's the one who decides. So because of that, there's no ketubah money that he gets in the case that she wanted to divorce him. So now, anyway, that was all about another reason why she gets ziburit. And with the second thing was really saying is not only why she gets ziburit, because the husband needs financial incentive to get married, so she can only collect from the worst of his land, but also explains why she doesn't have to ever give him money if she causes the divorce, because she doesn't really ever have a way to cause the divorce. Tubat isha b'ziburit. Now that we mentioned this tubat isha ziburit, and it was mentioned in the Mishnah as well, we're now going to go in depth about it. And we're going to see this halacha Mar Zutra. And what we're going to do is we're going to give 3 questions against what Mar Zutra says, try to reject what he says, but each time we're going to answer it, even if the answers might be a little bit difficult, like a stretch. Before we go on, I just want to quickly review. So we already reviewed the beginning of the daf, which was all about the first answer, how this tikkun olam by Torah law, it's already the case. And the answer, if the answer is, well, by Torah law, either we read it as Rabbi Yishmael, by Torah law is by the Niza, the one who was damaged, by tikkun olam, it's b'dimazi. Then we brought a second answer to that after dealing with that whole thing. Our second answer was, it's actually just coming to explain the Torah law. It is according to Rabbi Akiva that anyway, by Torah law, it's b'dimazik, it goes by my value, the value of my property, my best land, but it's already the tikkun olam is why the Torah said so. It's to make a better society so we don't have robbers and thieves. Once we quoted that right about the reasons, then we went into the reasons for Balcho bebenoni and why Tubat Isha is ziburit. Now we're going to talk about the ziburit, and we also mentioned there was this machloket. But in the meantime, we're going to see Tubat Isha ziburit. We're going to go with the mainstream opinion that you get the worst of the land. So Amar Mar Zutra Bereder Rav Nachman Lo Maran Elamiyat. It's only, by the way, when she's collecting from Yatomim. The woman has two ways to collect her ketubah. Either when the husband dies, and then she's collecting from the orphans, or and his heirs, or she's collecting from the husband himself when he divorces her. So if she's collecting from the husband himself, she collects from the husband from average land. It's only from the orphans. No, right before this, it sounded like she collects from anyone, but Ziburit, it's just an incentive for the husband to get married, that he doesn't have to lose his good land when she collects her ketubah money. But now it seems like it's really just an issue of the orphans. And there's a general principle that anyone who collects money from orphans only collects from Ziburit. So let's say you're a Baal Chov, you're owed money by someone, but that person dies. If they were alive, you'd be able to collect from the average land. Since they're dead now and you're collecting from the orphans, we kind of help the orphans by saying people can only take your worst land, not your better land. So now they have the following question, which doesn't make any sense according to Mar Zutra. Miyatme, my area, if it's only from orphans, my area k'tubat isha, why would the Mishnah specifically say the k'tuba of a woman? It's anything, right? Afilu komi leinami. Anything anyone collects from an orphan, not just the k'tuba of a woman. Dihatnan, doesn't it say in the Mishnah? This is a Mishnah that comes up in Gittin, right? Which is, you can't, right? We had this already. You can't take money from Yatomim unless it's from the worst of the land. Now, this in the previous chapter. So, elalav mine, it must be from him. Okay, that's the first rejection of Mar Zutra. To which the Gemara says, no, we can explain why they had to specify Ketubah Isha, even though no one else can collect from orphans from anything better than the worst of the land. Lo olam yatme, really it's just the orphans, like Mar Zutra said, but Ketubah Isha eitzri. They had to specifically say Ketubah of a woman. Why? The rabbis have incentive to get this woman remarried. They don't want a woman on the street struggling to make a living. So therefore, they say, listen, you might have thought she can get from better land, because if she gets better land, maybe people will want to marry her. It'll be easier for her to get remarried. That's the china. So the people end up liking them again, liking them for their money. Again, we see how utilitarian marriage was in those days. But not to say it wasn't for other reasons, but it always helps. Kamash malan. Therefore, they're coming to teach you, no. We have two things pulling at us. On the one hand, we want the woman to get remarried. On the other hand, we have orphans, and we have to protect orphans. That comes first. She can only collect from the worst of the land. Second question against Mar Zutra. Amarabba Tashma. Let's learn from this source. Rabbi Meir Omel K'tubat Isha Benonit. Remember, Rabbi Meir disagreed, and he said she gets from average land. Miman, from who is he talking about? If it's from orphans only, in other words, if Mar Zutra says K'tubat Isha B'ziburit is from orphans, and then Rabbi Meir disagrees and says she gets from the Benonit, from the orphans, how could you possibly say that? Makes no sense, right? Miman, Rabbi Meir doesn't Rabbi Meir agree that you can only collect from orphans from the worst of the land? So how could he possibly allow her to collect from orphans from the average land? To which they say, no, right? And therefore, elalav mine. It must mean Rabbi Meir is talking about she can collect from average land from the husband. And the one who disagrees with him, Rabbi Yehuda and the rabbis, say, no, she can only collect from her husband from the worst of the land. And this then would go against Mar Zutra. To which the Gemara says, right, and Michlal, from here you can infer to Rabbanan Sabre B'Ziburit, that the rabbis or Rabbi Yehuda hold, right, Ziburit from the husband against Mar Zutra. To which the Gemara says no, and they're going to use the same logic from the previous one. Lo olam yatme. Rabbi Meir actually holds what we suggested in the previous answer and rejected and said it's coming to go against that theory. Well, that's Rabbi Meir's theory. Rabbi Meir says, even though it's orphans, we're actually going to side on helping this woman so that she could get remarried, and we're going to let her collect from the Benoni. So their second source, using Rabbi Meir to try to explain what Rabbi Yehuda and the rabbis were saying, we tried to suggest again, it must be from the husband. And then again, we said, no, it could be really only from orphans. Third attempt to knock out Mar Zutra. Again, Mar Zutra said, when we talk about that she collects from the worst of the land, we're only talking about from orphans. If she collects from the husband because it's divorce, she actually can get from average land. Well, I'm Rabbi. Tashma, let's learn from here. Our Mishnah. Now, here we have three different people that are collecting land from three different types of land. Miman, from who? If you're going to say, Ilema, that the woman's collecting miyatme, my iriak tubatisha, afilu kol haninami. Why would you just say the ketub of a woman? If we're talking about collecting from orphans, it would be anyone who collects from orphans gets from the ziburit. It doesn't make sense in the context of the mission to say if you're collecting damages, you get from the best. If you're collecting an obligation, someone who owes you money, a debt, you get it from the average. And if you're collecting a ketub of a woman, which really just means if you're collecting from an orphan, you get from the worst. Also, if you're collecting damages from an orphan. Also, if you're collecting an obligation from an orphan, it would be the ziburit. So that makes no sense in the context of the mission. So again, elalav mine, it must be from the husband. But again, we're going to have an answer, and this is a more, I would say, out there answer, a little more of a creative answer and harder to see in the simple reading of the Mishnah. But Amrav Achabar Yaakov Hacha b'mayaskinan. What's our case in the Mishnah? It's not a regular case. It's kigon shena'asa arev l'nizkei beno l'balchov beno l'ktubat kalato. It's a person, a father, who said, if the husband owed damages to someone, he said, if he doesn't pay, I'll pay. I'll be the guarantor. Someone who owed a loan, and he said, I'll be a guarantor of the loan. Someone who took out, he married a woman, and the father said, if he doesn't pay the ketubah, I'll pay it. Now, in this case, what happens? The husband doesn't have the money, or is dead, right? In the case of the ketubah, he'll be dead, you'll see. And they're going to collect it from the guarantor. Let's say there's no heirs. The heirs can't pay the money. They have no money left. So they're going to go to the guarantor. Now, when they go to the guarantor, they're not going to orphans anymore. So you wouldn't think that the laws of ziburit apply. Comes the Mishnah and tells you, Hai kidine v'hai kidine. Since he's taking the place of the orphans, he pays just like the orphans would pay, only from the worst of the land. So really, it's just for orphans. But then it extends to the guarantor who's basically taking the place of orphans. Now, let's just keep going and let's explain them why, if the guy is dead, why in the Nizakin case is he not paying the ziburit, the worst of the land? So now they're going to explain. Nizakim ubalchov timichaim gavu. In general, damages and obligations are paid, or debts, right, are paid when you're alive still. Therefore, iunami kimagbe kimechaim magbe. Therefore, even though the son's dead, let's say, or doesn't have the money, the father pays just like the son would have paid because he guaranteed for the son. But k'tubat isha de la'achar mita gavya. But ketubah of a woman, when the husband dies, right? It's always when the husband dies you have to pay the ketubah. And la'achar mita miman gavya. And normally after death, who do you take it from? Miyatme, from the orphans. So therefore, this arev, when he said, I'm going to be a guarantor for my son's ketubah, he was expecting, right, that the orphans would pay it. And therefore, he's taking the place really of the orphans. And if it were orphans, it would only be ziburit, right? So therefore, iunami ki magbe k'la'achar mita magbe. So he's only going to collect like it was after death, meaning they're only going to collect from him. Sorry, the opposite. They're going to collect from him, specifically the father who's the guarantor. By the way, this would be true for any guarantor, as if he was taking the, right, who's he taking the place of? The orphans. So therefore, you can only collect it from the worst of his land. And that resolves that issue, basically, because now we no longer have to worry about we don't have to say, if it was from the husband, you actually would get it from the Benonit, which is what Mar Zutra said. And we're only talking about orphans or someone who takes the place of the orphan, like the guarantor. So now the Gemara says, wait, but wait a minute. You can't possibly say that because we already know that a guarantor for a ketubah actually doesn't even have to pay the money. Okay, we're going to get to this tomorrow, why this is. In the next step, we're not going to understand this yet today, but apparently it's a known thing that a guarantor for a ketubah doesn't have to pay. His property is not mishuabad, is not lien to the woman. She can't really demand it from the guarantor. So they answer very simply, b'kablan. It's a type of guarantor called a kablan, where he did more and accepted upon himself more obligation and really did fully accept the obligation of the money and paying it if the husband doesn't pay it, right? Or if the husband's heirs are not able to pay it, he accepts it. So once we put it in the kablan category, it works. Again, the difference between kablan and guarantor, regular guarantor, we're going to see tomorrow in a rave and a kablan. But anyway, we'll see a little bit more about a kablan now. There's a debate even within the kablan. There's two types of kablanim. A kablan can accept to guarantee a loan, let's say, in the case where the person who's borrowing the money has some property and he's accepting the loan, right? And saying, I'll guarantee this loan because it's probably assuming you'll pay back your money on your own. Hopefully you won't need me. Then there's a guarantor who guarantees a loan for someone who doesn't have any property, doesn't have any money to their name. Now, the Gemara is going to have a machloket about this, about whether we think you really mean it. Were you just trying to get the guy, right? There's two ways to guarantee. Now, it's hard to say you didn't really mean this, but some people say you didn't really mean it. You didn't really mean to accept this upon yourself. All you did was you wanted the person to get the loan, so you signed for them. You didn't really mean that you were guaranteeing your property. And it's hard to say because you did guarantee the loan, but you didn't really mean it. Or some people think you really did mean it. So the Gemara is going to say the following. In this case, what's the assumption? Well, the assumption is the heirs have no money, so probably this guy never had money. So, if you say the kablan, even if the borrower never had any money, he still agreed to take guarantee this loan fully, then it makes perfect sense because here the son had no money, the father took it upon himself to do it, right? And that's why when the husband dies, the kids have no money from the father, so he has to pay the loan. But some people hold that the kablan only really guarantees this money properly, this loan, in the case where the person had property or had money. Then, in this case, how can you explain it? Because obviously the son had no money, because look, he died and there was nothing left for her to collect her ketubah. So we're going to have two possible answers. The first one's the obvious, which is he had the money originally. In other words, the ketubah was written, let's say, 20 years before. The father guaranteed because the husband had money, but then the son ran out of money. So when he died, nothing went to his heirs, and they had to go back to the father. So originally, he really did mean it because the son actually had the money. Here's another interesting answer. The example they brought was a father to a son. Even though a normal person may not really fully guarantee a loan, if you have no money, they'll just maybe say it to get you the loan, but they don't really mean it. And you can't hold them up to that, at least according to one opinion. But a father to a son, he really does mean it. I mean, fathers, this is what they do for their children. Even if they think their son's not going to pay back the loan, they're assuming the responsibility. So in this case, the father really was assuming, and that's why we can demand the ketubah from him. But again, the whole point was only from the ziburit, right? In the case of the ketubah, because the ketubah was anyway going to come from the orphans, and the orphans she was only going to get from ziburit. So the guarantor that's coming in place of them, again, the guarantor called a kablan, not an arev, that type of guarantor is going to be able to collect from only the bad land. And that's where we're going to end today. We're going to start this other thing tomorrow about the difference between an arev and a kablan, and understand why an arev actually is not what you think, which is a guarantor, but actually his property or his money is not lien to whatever he gets, to the ketubah specifically, and why that is. Okay, so quick review. So again, we started with two ways of understanding nizakin. Shamin lam b'yidid is tikkun olam. Is it rabbinic? Is it a rabbinic thing, or is it a Torah thing? Is it rabbinic and according to Rabbi Yishmael, or is it Torah and according to Rabbi Akiva? And it's just really giving the reason for the Torah is to make a better society. Then from there, we got off on a tangent because we brought Rabbi Shimon and the Bride to explain the reason, and then he explained the reason behind the Ktubat Isha and the Baal Chov, why they get Beinonit or Ziburit. We also saw there was a machloket about whether the Ktubat Isha gets Ziburit or Beinonit. We explained the logic around that. And then we brought Mar Zutra, who said, when we say the Ketubah of a woman they get from the Ziburit is only when we're talking about heirs. And then we brought 3 sources to question him. Each time we resolved it. The last one by saying not only from the heirs, but if it was the father who guaranteed the loan, the Ketubah, then she would also be able to only get from him from the Ziburit. But the assumption of Mar Zutra was if it was from the husband, she would actually get average land. We don't hold like Mar Zutra, from what I recall. I mean, certainly when we learned in Ketubah, it was all about from the Ziburit. Anyway, that's an interesting point. So that's it for today's daf. We'll continue from here tomorrow and understand better the idea of the different types of guarantors and what the unique halacha by Ketubah is, why the guarantor why you wouldn't be able to collect from a regular guarantor. Have a great day.